questions about what a cooperative is at the end, we can talk it through. We are a worker cooperative, which means that we are worker owned. We're also what's called a non-share cooperative, and so although it's a shorthand, and I'll get into this a little bit later, we refer to ourselves as worker owners. We're actually worker members, and I'll get into that in a minute. So we're a remote first workplace. We're only in person about once a year, all of us. Although we see each other more often than that. There's a co-working space in the west end of Toronto that we all meet up at once a week. And we primarily use Matrix, which is a federated version of Slack, essentially, as our primary means of communication. So we spend a lot of time on chat and on calls. And there's 11 of us. I don't know if I said that. Okay, so like any organization, a cooperative is the sum of its people, and I think that's even more true in small organization. Hypha came out of Civic Tech Toronto, specifically out of a mesh networking project that several of the original founders were interested in. So I'm not an original founding member. There were 7 of them to begin with. 4 are still at the co-op and 3 of them have left. And myself and 2 other colleagues were the second cohort of new members to come in after the original 7. I would say that throughout what our interests are is what guides our work. So right now, the areas that we're looking at specifically are around digital trust, the equitable technology development, and a curiosity about new and emerging ways of connecting and working. We like to say we're an R&D partner for leaders in finance, culture, and technology. But what that actually means in practice is that we operate as a consultancy. So we provide a range of technical services and engineering management, I would say, to a variety of client projects, and I'll talk about those in a minute. And if you want to take a look at how we work internally, our handbook, including this timeline, is available at the URL there, and we try to keep that as up to date as possible and make it as open and transparent as we can. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the governance structure. So this is part of what makes working in a cooperative different. So in theory, we have both sort of a governance side of things, which would be the board of directors and members, and then there's an operational side, which would be stewards, team leads, contractors, employees. In reality, because there's only 11 of us, the separation of concerns is quite tangled up, because what it means is that we hold dual roles. So what do I mean by that? So as an example, because we haven't currently all of the board members are also regular members. It means that sometimes, and I'm the president of the board, I put on my proverbial president of the board hat and meet with my colleagues in that capacity. And then sometimes I would take that off and then think about the business from a perspective of a member or like an employee. And so these are two different like ways of looking at the way you're running the cooperative. It's in larger organizations, there is a more real separation of concerns. For example, they'll have external board members that would not be regular members or even employees. But in our cooperative, there is sort of like this overlap. So we have a board of directors, there's 4 people on it. Members elect the board, we have a 3-year term. Then on sort of the operational side of things, we're organized into stewards. So we have a growth steward, a solidarity steward, and a resourcing steward, and those roles are responsible for business development, solidarity, like work that we love and care about but don't get paid for, and resourcing, which is more like an operational concern. And then sort of adjacent to that, we're also organized into teams. So, and that's actually what works on the client projects, which brings in our income. Right. All right, so how do you become a member of Hypha? So becoming a member of Hypha is analogous to becoming a co-owner of the co-op. And it's definitely, so as I mentioned, when I joined 4 years ago, I was one of the first onboarded. Yeah.
Oh,
sorry.
It just got stuck for a second. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. Is it Is it back? Is it good?
Oh, very good.
Keep going?
Very good. Please keep going.
Okay, cool. All right. So I would say that we're refining the membership pathway as we go. But what the process looks like is typically we post for a job, like any type of role. Sometimes we hire under contract it just depends on sort of the type of role, whether or not we have income to support that role long-term or short-term. So sometimes they're like shorter contracts, and then sometimes it's a membership pathway employee. So they begin as, let's say, an employee. They would contribute to both client and internal work. So we'll talk about the internal work in a second. The client work is the sort of stuff that you probably think about. It would be project management, front and back end engineering and development, design, those sorts of things, information architecture, all of that stuff. They work with us over the course of a year. And then at the end of that time, they are asked usually at that point, we know that whether or not we want to offer the person membership. We do have the ability to suggest to the individual that we're not ready to offer the membership, in which case we can agree with them that it would be for another 6 months. At most points, we offer membership, them to apply for membership after a year. We have a fairly, I wouldn't say informal, but the process is a 4-part questionnaire to talk about why they want to become a member. They submit that, and then we either meet or discuss online, depending on how people are feeling about it, and then we vote on whether or not we want them to become a member. And it requires a unanimous vote, and it's anonymous. So far, we've never had the experience where we vote and somebody does not want to accept the prospective member, but it could be possible. And definitely we've had instances where we talked through like the benefits that person would be to the cooperative, like you would in making any hiring decision. The difference here is that you really are essentially accepting this person as like a partnership and a co-owner of the business, and so it's undertaken with a lot more gravitas, I guess you would say, than just your average hiring decision. Alrighty. So I mentioned earlier internal work. So we sort of got the client work on the one side, which I touched on, and we'll go into some examples of the projects that we work on. And then on the other side is what we call back office or working group work. And so this is sort of the difference between working on the business and working in the business. This is a lot of work running any business is. And so we're divided into 5 different working groups: finance, infrastructure, ops, governance, and comms. Each of us sits on, I think, 2 or 3 at most working groups. I'm on 2. I sit on finance and communications. And what's interesting is that a lot of us don't have additional domain expertise in our working group. For example, my background is not in finance at all. So we do really need to acquire it on the job. And bear in mind that this is like, that might sound a bit chaotic, but it's actually a little bit more nuanced than that, in as much as there's like very clear handoff processes between old and new working group members. So if somebody, for example, is responsible for a particular area of finance, say like accounts payable or accounts receivable, they onboard the person that's replacing them. There's job shadowing, and those individuals that are coming in do actually get some training. As well, we encourage all already use, like Matrix, GitHub, like this anonymous polling tool that we found called ADoodle, into this really lightweight decision-making stack. And so there are, I would say, more bespoke governance software out there, but we found that people didn't really want to use, so they didn't want to add another tool to their toolkit. And instead, we just use this as sort of like a bricolage for different types of tools that we were already using day to day. Yeah, and definitely check out Metagov. So the other two projects, Spores Garden and Nectar and Pollen, are both app proto-based projects. So that's the protocol that underpins Blue Sky. In case anybody doesn't know that, there's tons of activity happening there. So the digital Spores is a digital garden that my colleagues built, and it uses PDFs, which are the personal data stores, which is really fundamental to app proto. And this is just essentially, like it says, like a mimetic site. So you can plant a little flower. Every person that signs up through their Blue Sky account, which is how it works right now, gets an individual and totally uniquely generated flower. There's also something called a spore, which is a bit like an Easter egg that you can pass around amongst people that have different gardens. And so this was just a fun way of exploring what some of the attributions and affordances were for app proto in a more fun space. And we, being Hypha is, we derive our name from mycelium, so we're into, as you can see, like natural and nature themed names. Okay, let me see. Nectar and pollen, okay, that's the last one. So nectar and pollen are two related projects. Nectar is, if I remember correctly, because this is the project I work on, Nectar is the web app itself, and Pollen is the underlying stack. What it essentially does is finds similar images across the atmosphere, so any tool using app proto with perceptual hashing. So think about like community notes in apps, like it's a similar idea where you can, once you have the browser extension installed, you can track image reposts, make annotations around, like if you know, for example, that it is or is not AI generated, or if you think that it's been changed. That's the sort of thing that you could do with Nectar. All right, so those are our fun projects. Of course, like, we do hope that the fun projects also eventually lead to paid clients, and sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. So these are all examples of our paid clients, and I'll talk about each of them just briefly. We can definitely dig into more of this if you have questions later on. So the first one is Starling Lab. This is a project out of USC and Stanford, the USC Shoah Foundation in Stanford. And it looks at the provenance of media assets across a variety of contexts. One of the most well-known projects that we worked on was bringing evidence, digitally stamped evidence, to the International Criminal Court early on in the war in Ukraine. So there's some really interesting applications of cryptographic technology in this particular project, and they do a ton of really interesting work. So I highly recommend checking them out. And our role in that was that Hypha essentially is the engineering component of Starling. We do all of the technical work, and sort of work is like a fractional CTO type of role for that project. For Hack, so this is a digital arts museum in Switzerland, and for them we developed what is I'm always like, is it really the world's first? Anyway, they said it was the world's first tokenized museum membership, and I actually haven't seen any others. I didn't see any others before that. And so what's interesting about this project, one, having a tokenized membership fit in well with what they wanted to do, because they are a fully digital museum. Like, all of their artworks are media-based artworks. But what was interesting about it is that they really wanted to make it accessible to people. So although we had a traditional, if you call it that, regular Web3 way to buy your tokenized membership, there was also like and then which give you access to like a token gated community. The other thing that was interesting is that there was also like a very non-Web3 version where you could just purchase it using your credit card, and then we built a whole system that basically handed off that membership, and so the person still ended up in the community, but without having to actually touch any Web3 wallet or cryptocurrency. Open Archive, this is a project we've been working on for a couple of years. So we took two like quite nascent protocols, one called Valid, the other called IRO, and sort of knit them together to create a decentralized backend for a citizen archiving app. That project is still ongoing. The app is available through I think it's actually available on Android and iOS, but the DWeb backend component right now is still in testing. And then lastly, we work on a project called Equity Lab, which is focused on AI governance frameworks, and that project is a much more traditional startup type of project. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about AI because how can we not talk about AI? And I'm going to start, interestingly enough, with our NFT pet. So we have a pet called, if you look at our people page, we have an NFT pet called Rue. It's an artwork that was created by a friend of Hypha's. And what's interesting about this particular NFT is that you have to pass it between wallets every 6 months, or it dies or ceases to exist. And so we've kept it alive for 4 years, I think, at this point. And so it's become kind of like part of our lore. Like the NFT appears on our work, on our people page. And so it's sort of integrated into like who we are as people. And so we then named, so that's the name of the NFT. And so then Rue sort of evolved into a bot in our matrix room. So a lot like a Slack bot, but we just gave it the same name. So it was like all kinds of things around like, we use it for things like voting, managing social media, keeping track of vacations, like, you know, your average sort of like helpful Slack bot that pops in and says like, so-and-so's on vacation, or there's an upcoming holiday. And so then from there, a couple of years ago, I think like 2 years ago, one of our former colleagues, Mauve, was really interested in local AI. You should definitely check them out if you're interested in local AI. They go by Ranger Mauve online. And they were interested in trying to run, like essentially give Rue an AI brain. And so that's what we've done. And so we created something called Rue LLM, which is a RAG-based approach, uses retrieval augmented generation, and tool calls to GitHub, and a couple of other tools that we use a lot, and you can access Rue LLM through our chat. So that's sort of like the trajectory, and then, this is sort of what I call the Rue to Rook transformation. So earlier, no, I guess it was at the end of last year, we decided to try and productize this. So one interesting thing to note about tech co-ops, and we can talk about this sort of at the end, is that access to funding is a lot more difficult because of our governance structure. So running a product-focused tech cooperative is much more challenging than running a service-focused tech cooperative. And we do and have created products before. We have a product called Distributed Press, which is used for decentralized publishing. But we are at this current stage trying to productize Rue LLM into what we call Rook. It was a double entendre, both the chess piece and the bird. Sorry, we good?
Yeah, I believe we're good. There's just an alarm that goes off here at 7.
Sorry?
There's just an alarm that goes off here at 7, so don't be alarmed if that happens.
Oh, okay. Okay, good to know, fair warning. All right. Okay, so Rook, where was I? Okay, Rook. So we are working on creating, so Rook is, as I mentioned, is a RAG-based system. So we're using an open weight model called Quen to run Rook, and it's based, the whole infrastructure is located on our server in Toronto. We have a server rack down at like 1 Yonge Street, but there's like a big data center down there, and we have a server there. So the idea is that we've created tenanted like secure silos within Rook. So you could give somebody a particular silo, they upload all of their documents, and then they can query them. So it's similar to like a similar use case to like Notebook LMs, you've used that. But this is really focused on a privacy first approach. And we're working with an organization in the US. He's a lawyer, but he's actually like a really well-known cooperative lawyer in the US. And we're tweaking it for his use case. With the thinking being, well, one, he's interested in working with us, but also the thinking being that working with a lawyer is a super useful first use case because the privacy and security standards are so high with solicitor-client confidentiality, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a great bar to try to meet for our first deployment. And yeah, you can check it out. It's at hellorook.ai. And we're hoping to get more funding for the project in the coming months and try and offer it as a service or standalone tool if people want to run their own infrastructure. Currently, it's an open source project, but we are we'll think about what the development of that looks like as we go forward, and we try to monetize it. The other thing related to AI that just came out today actually is a project I've been working on called the Cooperative AI Blueprint. We did a feasibility study for the cooperative sector, which essentially says, what does co-op AI look like? Do people want to use it? What are the trade-offs? And we did a small survey. There's about 60 respondents, but it was actually pretty interesting in that although I think the national, like the Canadian national business AI use is pegged at something like insanely low, like 12%, I think. The small cohort of survey respondents we had, they said 67% of them were using it. I mean, obviously this is a self-selecting sample, but it is interesting to see like the 12% stat came out in June of 2025. So it's interesting just to see how quickly the landscape has evolved and changed in the year. Alrighty. All right, so maybe sort of zooming back out and talking a little bit on my last couple of slides about what I think tech co-ops can offer, what I think co-ops can offer tech. So definitely lessons on better governance. And I think the other key piece for me is around like the data question, like in the context of AI, like what is the future now that the internet has been essentially scraped? I think about things like content producers striking deals with CDNs like Cloudflare, which is adding like another layer of mediation between producers of content and audiences. And so there's sort of like all of these like pieces that are forming out of the AI boom right now. And I wonder, like, for example, what would a data cooperative look like if instead they were to be like play that Cloudflare role? Like, what would it look like to organize data cooperatives around people that are willingly giving their data so that they can then, access some profit from it? And there is a co-op in Switzerland, I think, that people have decided to contribute their anonymized medical data, and then they use it for clinical studies. And the people that have joined the cooperative make I don't think it's very much, but they make a small amount of money when their data is used. So I mentioned I was talking a bit about governance earlier, and I do really think this is a fundamental part of being a cooperative, and this fluency, governance really in essence requires a lot of fluency with decision making and negotiation. So it's not just a like command and control style of being in the world, right? It's a lot of like collaboration and understanding like the perspectives of others. And I think overall, like, I mean, this is something that any project could use, or any entity, but I think tech in particular can benefit from this because it really does invite other perspectives and values. And it really, the emphasis within the cooperative sector is on creating something to like nurture or maintain rather than just grow large and sell it. All right, last couple of slides here. Okay, so co-ops versus startups. So why would you want to start or join a tech cooperative? I always say that tech co-ops are like trading one set of problems for another. I've worked in a lot of different organizations in a variety of contexts. Oh my, sorry, my dog is coming to interrupt me in the middle of this, of course. And I think that for me at least, the trading one set of problems for another essentially means that these are better problems, but it's instead of problems of like having a shitty boss or like hating the work that you do, it's the problems of like trying to negotiate and come to consensus or consent. We actually work with a consent-based approach, which is a little bit different amongst myself and 10 other people when we make a very pivotal decision. A lot of decisions we make, we have a fair amount of autonomy, so I wouldn't want to give the idea that like we sit down and talk through everything. But because we're a horizontal organization and there is no big boss, like it really does require a lot of discussion to try and make sure that people understand the direction that we're going with things. I also hope that it produces better technology. I mean, I think that's an open question, and definitely there need to be more of a critical mass of tech cooperatives to see if they actually can produce something that's different. But that's another point. And then I would say that finally, I think it's just kind of cool to be doing something that's like radically different. Like small businesses are hard, no matter how they're structured. But this is like co-ops are both have been around forever and are kind of uncharted territory when it comes to their interfacing with tech. So it's a very interesting space to be in. Okay. And this is my last slide. Okay. So in Toronto, it's Toronto Tech Week, and I was watching the Homecoming live stream yesterday, which is like their big main event. And I was thinking about how it's like the event yesterday has such a different flavor from last year, which was like growth and hype and shiny new things. And this year everybody was like kind of serious, and there was a lot of folks from like the defense tech, and every the words seemed to be sovereign. And so like the tech sector itself is going through some very interesting changes, to put it mildly. Would be, I think, the understatement of the century. And I would not say that the cooperative model is by any means the answer to what's wrong with tech, but it does provide a different way of approaching the creation of these both magical and maddening tools. And I honestly think that we all deserve technology that meets us where we are and for who we are, not just for like some sort of like archetypal tech bro in Silicon Valley. And frankly, the best way to get that technology is to start building tech that's inspired by different motivations other than profit and exit, and for people to actually use those alternatives. I think, in my perspective, it's the only way we get anything better and different. And that's all of my slides. Okay.
Okay, so a round of applause for Andi for your presentation. Now we'll be taking questions.